twisting and turning underneath my covers. I couldn't sleep. I was 12 years old, and I couldn't stop thinking about death. Where will I go when I die? Where was I before I was born? Does time just keep going forever and ever and ever? My mind spinning round and round with existential questions. I felt sick to my stomach. You're not supposed to worry about this. Nobody worries about this. At least that's what I thought. Because nobody talked about death at soccer practice. Nobody talked about death at gymnastics. It was just not the topic of conversation. One day at Hebrew school, I found the courage to approach my teacher, Mr. Mallet. Do you know what happens when you die? I asked. With a calm and reassuring voice, he told me that while none of us know exactly what happens when we die, many Jews believe that our souls return to God. I felt so relieved, not because of his answer, but because of his warmth, his way of making me feel like it was perfectly acceptable for me to be grappling with death. Knowing I had a place I could share my concerns alleviated some of my worry and brought me great peace. Many of us feel alone in grappling with death. Discussing such a heavy topic with our loved ones might seem overwhelming. To avoid burdening others, we keep our fears to ourselves, carrying this weight alone. There's the mother who's afraid of dying because she doesn't know who will support her son when she's gone. The brother who worries about losing his dear sister to cancer. The student who worries about their friend dying by suicide. There's the widow who grieves the loss of their beloved spouse day after day. The couple who avoids speaking with their children about end-of-life care and funeral arrangements because it's just easier not to talk about it. Yom Kippur is a rehearsal for death, an opportunity to confront mortality as we wrestle with our thoughts and feelings surrounding death, even when it's painful. Our sages called the hard work of Yom Kippur a cheshbon hanefesh, an accounting of the soul. Through the rituals of fasting, wearing white, praying, taking responsibility for our mistakes, and making peace with those we have wronged, we invest our hearts in this holy, transformative death rehearsal. As our liturgy reminds us, none of us know who will live and who will die in this new year. On Rosh Hashanah, this is written. On Yom Kippur, this is sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? The question is not who will die. We know that eventually all of us will die, as will our loved ones. The questions are, who will live a meaningful life in the face of death? Who will seek help when navigating challenging thoughts and feelings around death? Who will display kindness and compassion to those who are dying or grieving? As Benjamin Franklin famously wrote, in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. Still, we know that we hold tremendous power in the way that we live. As Rabbi Harold Kushner taught, The inevitability of death should not cause us to give up on the holiness of life. There is deep holiness in the way we support one another, in the way we ask for help, and in the way we hold each other's hands through challenging times. A few months ago, I officiated a graveside funeral. Toward the end of the service, the sky filled with clouds and it began to downpour. As we all hurried to escape the rain, we huddled together under a few umbrellas. Together we laughed joyfully, knowing that the person who died would have gotten a chuckle watching all of her loved ones running together in the rain. Shuffling through the wet grass, I smiled as I thought to myself, this is what we do for each other. We shelter each other from the rain. We can't stop the rain, but we can offer an umbrella and stick together so that nobody is alone. One of the greatest blessings of being part of a temple community is that we support each other during these times. What are the ways that we can hold out umbrellas for those caught in the downpour? What are the ways that we can help each other cope with death? Attending a Shiva Minyan, a service dedicated to providing mourners with support, is an incredibly meaningful way to help. Shiva Minyans take place at temple or at the mourner's home. It doesn't matter if you are the mourner's best friend or you barely know the person. We are all part of this community. When you show up for a fellow community member during this painful time, it is powerful. Now, I know many of you might be thinking, but Rabbi, I wouldn't know what to say. I wouldn't know what to do. I'd probably just make it worse. It's not about speaking eloquently or fixing the situation. It's about being a kind presence and bearing witness to someone's pain. When you show up and say, I'm sorry for your loss, I'm here with you. When you listen, when the mourner shares stories, pictures, memories, those are the moments of holiness the mourner will never forget. Attending Shabbat services is another way to support the mourner, as many people attend services to say Kaddish for their loved ones, and they need the presence of a minyan to do so. During this painful time of mourning, they will be uplifted by a supportive, present congregation. Jewish tradition teaches us to take responsibility for one another, sending condolence cards, meals, and donations to those in mourning, checking on people after they've experienced a loss, especially months later when the cards and phone calls and visits have stopped. These actions make a difference. Another way that we can help each other cope is by engaging in conversations about death and truly listening to one another without judgment or fear. We need to work on normalizing death as a topic of conversation. We live in a society where death has been removed from what we are allowed to talk about. Together, let's engage in conversations around death for the purpose of holy living. What are your feelings regarding death? What are the difficult conversations you avoid having with your loved ones? What is your child asking you about death, and how do you respond? What are your parents' fears about dying, and how have they impacted their funeral and legacy planning? Our temple is a place where you can talk about these things, where you can talk about death, a place where you can feel supported through difficult chapters of illness, loss, and grief. Whether you choose to share your feelings with me, a counselor, a friend, family, or community member, please know that sharing your feelings on this heavy topic may bring you peace. While grief is not linear and every individual processes death in their own way, none of us need to navigate it alone. It was truly meaningful when a student in our religious school came to my office to speak with me about death. We sat together with his father, and the student expressed that he couldn't fall asleep at night because he was so worried about what happens when you die. I shared with him a beautiful story told by Maury Schwartz that has brought me deep comfort, and I'll share that with you now. There once was a little wave bobbing along, having a grand old time. He's enjoying the wind and the fresh air until he notices the other waves in front of him crashing against the shore. "My God, this is terrible," the wave says. "Look what's going to happen to me." Then along comes another wave. It sees the first wave looking grim and says to him, "Why do you look so sad? What's wrong?" The first wave says, "You don't understand. We're all going to crash. All of us waves are going to be nothing. Don't you see? Isn't this terrible?" The second wave says, "No, you don't understand. You're not a wave. You're part of the ocean." I looked into the student's eyes, wondering what he would think of this story. And I was truly inspired by his thoughtfulness when he told me that he had already spent a great deal of time at the beach watching the waves and reflecting on life and death. Together, we talked about how, like the ocean waves, we are part of something greater than ourselves. We talked about how awesome it is that the love, the mitzvot, the kindness, and the spirit we share in our lifetime will remain part of humanity long after we are gone. Then I witnessed a moment between the student and his father that I will always hold dear to my heart. The father and son shared their own beliefs about death with each other. As the father spoke openly to his son, he became emotional, and instinctively the son embraced his father, drawing him close and leaning in for a hug as they cried together. As the father told his son how much he loved him and that they could talk about anything, I was overcome by admiration for their bravery to share what was on their hearts and to navigate the mysteries of life and death. When we find the courage to talk about death with those we love, we deepen our relationships and we come to see that none of us need to navigate it alone. Judaism contains a vast array of beliefs on death and the afterlife, which may bring us comfort as we engage in these conversations. Some of our most sacred texts teach that death is not the enemy of life. It is a healing time where we can achieve true atonement for our sins. Biblical texts teach about a collective destiny rather than an individual destiny. These texts speak of death as a time of being gathered to our kin and connecting with family. Rabbinic texts teach about the world to come, where the righteous sit with crowns on their head, enjoying the radiance of the divine. Saadia Gaon taught that in death we achieve a spiritual ecstasy. And the Neoplatonists taught that in death the soul enjoys a relationship of ascent toward God as part of its journey toward ultimate communion with the divine. Kabbalistic texts teach that each part of the soul travels to a different realm after death. Our virtuous deeds and study of Torah during life help protect us from judgment later. These Kabbalistic teachings explain that the soul is incarnated on earth with a specific task to fulfill. And if it does not fulfill its task, it will be reincarnated until it does. And one of our greatest teachers, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, taught that death is a homecoming, the ultimate self-dedication to the divine, a returning of the gift of life, and a sacred pilgrimage. Maimonides taught that the pleasures of the spiritual world are simply unknown and beyond our comprehension. As we can see, Judaism does not contain just one simple answer for the question of what happens when we die. Within Jewish tradition, there are many beliefs about death, and as we learn about more of these beliefs, we may find comfort and inspiration on our own search for the meaning of life and death. If you are interested in learning more about Jewish beliefs about death, spanning from biblical, rabbinic, Kabbalistic, and modern times, I hope that you will please join me and our community in study so that we may grapple with this topic together. In this new year, I will be teaching a series on Jewish views of death and the afterlife. Through this course, we will use our sacred text as a guide as we engage in meaningful and enriching conversations. We will also have opportunities for parents to learn some of the ways that they can discuss death with their children. I hope that you will join me as we navigate these heavy topics together. Now, I would like to conclude with a reading we share at funeral services, which reminds us that one of the most powerful ways to cope with death is to cherish life. And the child asked, "Tell me of life." And the sage answered, "Life, my child, is a mystery. We do not ask to be born, nor do we even understand the meaning of birth and creation. We grow and we experience life's pleasures and pains. We love, and slowly, oh so slowly, we come to realize that we have become, that we are. At that moment, we humble ourselves before the mystery of life and quietly say, though I knew not, I have been granted the most precious gift of all, the gift of life." And the child asked, "Tell me of death." And the sage answered, "Death, my child, is a mystery. It is the inevitable return of that gift of life, the gift which came free to us. We live as the trustee of that mysterious being, of that unexplainable becoming. Yes, you and I are but the trustees of life. We nurture it, we delight in it, and we give of it to others. And at the appointed time, we sadly, yet with pride, return it where it came from. The beauty, my child, is that what we are, what we have become, remains long, long after the gift has been returned. It remains as a precious keepsake with our loved ones who live on. May each of us experience holiness as we confront mortality and grapple with the awesome mysteries of life and death. May we experience Temple Beth-El as a sanctuary where we can ask these existential questions that keep us up late at night, twisting and turning underneath our covers. And may we understand that while we do not have all the answers, there is deep holiness in our questions, our curiosity, and our courage to share our feelings with one another. Gamar Chatima Tova, Good Yantif.